Hi, folks. Well, we're rolling into week two in school reform course, and I can tell by the discussion board, which I'm thoroughly impressed with. And why am I impressed? Because you have taken every reading and every video and internalized it, integrated it into your thought process, and also integrated it into the work that you're doing in your districts, analyzed it and pushed it right back into that discussion board with so meaningfully feedback to others and in your initial response. I have to use the word perfect. Um, every one of them, I'm almost done reading them. I think I've got four more left to read and respond. But every one of them, you have a wealth of information. And you have actually said, oh, this video is going to thought was going to be boring, or the reading, here we go again. And you found out they're not as bad as you might have thought they were. And I'm just thoroughly impressed. So kudos to you and thank you very much. Because every one of them for me was engaging to read and to respond to. So that's for the discussion board. And let me go back a little bit, the introductions. It's a large class. I seem to be having large classes lately. But we have a large class, so reading each of your introductions, and I know that you've engaged back and forth with some people, but there's commonalities in the class. So that's super, whether you might be in high school, or you might be in CTE, or something. There's like candidates out there, like students out there. So I think you might have gained a lot from reading your introductions too. Some people in Connecticut, it goes on and on. Anyways. So enough said about that because we're moving into week two. But I did want to give you the kudos about the work that you've done already. And I'm thrilled to have you all in this class because I can't wait to hear about your experiences truly in school reform because there's so much school reform going on there. I'm going to interject just a little bit and I mentioned it in my intro too, but at one point I was director of curriculum instruction in RSU 23, which it was Saco, Dayton, Old Orchard Beach. And so I had 9 schools that I worked with, and we did school reform obviously there. And I'm going to give you a little snippet of how I worked with staff and administrators with school reform. What we came up with was a 5-year plan when I went into the district. And one of my tasks was we had literacy specialists, and this was probably about 12 years ago when I started there. And I was adjunct for UNE. And this is not about me, this is about the task, but just to set the platform. And so when I first went in, there were literacy specialists that were hired for each school, and all they had was a job description. So I said, where are we going? Well, we don't know where we're going, but we're going to make it up together, I guess. So we ended up building a powerful coaching system within the district because each school had the literacy coach within. And I designed that with the staff, with research. So that's part of my belief, I guess I'll say, in having staff where I work side by side with staff and they work with me. A collaborative model, of course. So then, at that point in time, it was a math. We were not doing well in math scores. We had to look at the math system that we were using. So we did year one research. I asked the math curriculum design team, which is K-12, to look at different math programs that we had. We picked a couple. We brought in their representatives and so we could learn more about the programs. And that first year we did research on programs themselves, how it aligned to the standards, how it aligned to what we were doing, what we needed to implement, how much money it would cost. And then we designed, at the end of the year, we decided to, without focusing on one program, we decided to focus on one particular math program. In all our K-5 schools at that point. The next year, we ended up working on math in 6-8 and progressively into high school. So I'll focus just on that K-5 piece. So the second year, the end of the first year, I asked for volunteers who would be willing to implement, pilot that particular math program in the schools. I had 2 people from each grade level across the system. We would meet, they would implement, we would talk, we would get together, we would meet at least once a month. We'd talk about the trials and tribulations that were going on in the piloting, and we would take notes. So we did that throughout the year. So we looked at the implementation process, we collaboratively talked together, and if there were any tribulations, and we tried to figure out how it would be better in our third year. So in year 3, and I'm talking about this in a real nutshell because I don't want you to have to hear a 15-minute video. So year 3, basically, I took the teacher leaders who teacher trainers is what we call them. Of course, they were teacher leaders, and asked them who would like to be an implementer or use a training model, teach to teacher, the following year, the third year. And many of them stuck the course, of course, and ended up staying with it. So that third year, we had training, workshop days, and the training was done by the teachers. So, and the teachers were paid as trainers. So we worked through the whole year. We had the workshops, so we got feedback from the teachers. We used that feedback for the next training. So it was cyclical. And we would evaluate every single time we went along because part of the surveys at the end of the day in a workshop were used between how the workshop was going and the feedback that would help us for the next time. So that would leave that teacher trainers were in their schools, and if there was a staff meeting within a school and there were questions about the math, they could readily talk about it in their staff meetings. And then the fourth year, and of course we're assessing all the way along, as you can tell, with the surveys at the end of the workshop. And then the fourth year, we ended up having continuous implementation again, evaluating as we went along, assessing, I should say. Student assessments were built in there as well. And so then the fifth year, we evaluated the entire program, and then we determined what our next step would be. So we had a 5-year process of school reform in any initiative. And as I've said in my responses, I'm not a bandwagon person. I never was. I don't want to overwhelm staff. So we would determine, we'd look at scores, and we'd say, what do we need to work on next? And there was never 2 new reforms going on at one time. I was there for 8 years, and then I ended up going to UNE in the CAGS program, and I've been there going on 3 years now, full-time. So I retired from the public school system and went into higher ed full-time because I had been an adjunct at UNE since 2001. So that's my background, that's my beliefs, that's how I relate to you during your discussion board. Okay, so let's move into finally week 2 in our assignment. Obviously you have discussion board, you have the readings. Your assignment is to pick somebody in your district, your school, who knows reform and has been somebody who has implemented reform. And you have questions to ask. You also have an exemplar to go by. So I think I'm going to close again because this video is 8 minutes right now. So have a wonderful week. Email me at cmarca@une.edu if you have any questions. This is your announcement. I'll do a check-in in the middle of the week. If you've been in my courses before, I use the same format. If you have any suggestions, let me know. I'm here for you. Okay, thanks so much. Bye.